Hey, everyone. Thank you so much. It is a great night to be alive. How are you? Hi, Drina. How are you tonight? Give me a holler. Who else out there? Hi, Mary. How are you? Thanks for being with me this evening. Who else is out there? Just give me a holler. I don't spend enough time saying hello. Uh, looks like uh, Sandra. Hey, Sandra, if that's you out there, good to see you all. I'm so excited tonight about the word. This is something that's really excited about me. Hey, hi, Pauline. How are you this evening? I'm really excited about it. We're going to be talking about Elijah. And specifically, I want you to take a certain perspective from Elijah, probably a perspective that you may have heard before, but it's going to be some new and fresh insight on it. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hi, Eloise. How are you this evening? Thank you so much for being with me. Hi, Alice. Good to see you. And I just enjoy the Friday night devotions. Thank you so much for being faithful and doing those. All right. Now, Elijah is a prophet, a major prophet, really talked about, and he's someone who has touched the lives of many. You hear a lot about Elijah in the Old Testament. He comes to prominence around the book of Kings, but his prominence carries on throughout the New Testament. As a matter of fact, some people mistook Jesus for Elijah. Hey, Michael, how are you tonight? Thanks for being with me. Some people mistook Jesus for Elijah. Matter of fact, they said some people thought that Elijah or Jesus was Elijah reincarnated. All right, Glinda. Hey, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much, Glinda. All right, I miss seeing you, but it's good to see you here online. So follow me closely as we take a look at this particular part of Elijah's life, and let's see how he connects with us. In order to do this, we're going to take a look at First Kings chapter 19, and we're going to read one verse, which is verse number 18. Got that? First Kings chapter 19. Let's take a look at one verse, and it's going to be verse number 18. Here's what it says from the King James Version of the Bible. Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, every mouth which hath not kissed him. So the verse that we just read is a response to Elijah from the Lord himself. The Lord shares with Elijah that there are 7,000 strong that are still in this land that is overwhelmingly being ran by Jezebel. Now, we need to back up and give you a little background about this so you know why he makes this statement to Elijah. Elijah is a prophet. He is a prophet who does amazing things for God. He's zealous for God. He is someone who is a trailblazer, literally. You may have heard of Elijah earlier on in the book of Kings when he and a lot of the prophets of Baal had a competition of sorts. And what Elijah did was he said, listen, we're going to prove once for all whose God is the best. And in synopsis, they were supposed to call on their God uh, uh, to do something here with an altar. And Elijah called on his God. Anyway, what happened in the end was Elijah and his God obviously won, the God Yahweh. He rained down fire from heaven and burned up the entire altar. And the prophets of Baal, there was a whole bunch of them, man, I want to say close to 1,000, if I got the number correct. The prophets of Baal couldn't figure out what happened. As a matter of fact, they started cutting themselves and doing all kind of weird demonic things. So anyway, at the end of this whole display, these prophets were killed by Elijah. And that sent a message out to the multitude that God is greater than prophets of Baal. Anyway, Ahab, the king at the time, was married to this very wicked woman named Jezebel. They were responsible for spreading this wickedness of Baal throughout their entire land. So what happens is Elijah, just after completing this amazing miracle from God, gets a message from Jezebel. And Jezebel says, if you don't mark my words, and I'm paraphrasing, she said, if you don't mark my words, I'm going to kill you just like you killed our prophets. If I see you in here when it comes to sundown. So what Elijah did was he ran. So Elijah takes off running, and he's running through mud, mind you. We'll get back to that in a minute. And he's running away from Jezebel. He's running because Jezebel has scared him so much because he knows what she can do. And he's like, God, just take my life now. I'm a dead man. I'm a goner. Anyway, he runs, and about 40 days or so later on, after he stops and gets some strength and nourishment from an angel, he goes to this mountain, and God speaks to him, and this is what he tells him. He says, listen, you are not the only one. I have 7,000 men who are my prophets. And he also tells us some other stuff, which is to go and anoint Jehu, go and anoint Elisha. And essentially he tells them it's time for you now to pass this torch. Why is all of this significant, and why are these 7,000 significant? Well, watch this. Let me share with you. Here's where I'm going with this, all right? Elijah, and there's three little things I want you to kind of take a look at here. Take a look at Elijah and how he was plagued by his past. Plagued by his past. Second thing I want you to look at is the prophets. The prophets in relation to Elijah. Number one, the prophets were unknown to Elijah. They were unknown. Number two, the prophets were strong and faithful to God. Got that? And number three, the prophets were influenced by Elijah. 7,000 strong. There was a man back in the 60s who was from Atlanta, Georgia, who grew up in a segregated South. He's seen things probably we would only read about in books as he watched and pondered on how he could make racial segregation better. The man's name was Martin Luther King Jr., named initially Michael King Jr. after his father, but name was changed. Both changed their name to Martin Luther after the great Martin Luther. Well, anyway, what Dr. King did was he helped become an instrumental part in civil rights, desegregation, making sure all people were judged on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Well, you fast forward almost 40 years after his movement, a man who never knew him, a man who didn't interact with him, influenced or became the beneficiary of the work that Dr. King and his entire group did. The man's name was Barack Obama. 40 years later, he became the president. Fast forward even past that, there are people still benefiting from the work that Dr. King did. What am I saying? When we look at this, Elijah, who is doing a great work for God, is plagued by his past. We're like Elijah in many ways, and I don't have time to really get into it, but watch this. Elijah, if you go back and look at the beginning part of Kings chapter, 1 Kings chapter 19, all of Elijah's prayer is focused on him. Get it? It's focused on him. He's saying, listen, Lord, and I just read a little bit of it. He's saying, Lord, verse 4, what does it say? Oh Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And then he goes on to say, I've been zealous for you, Lord, all this time. And his whole prayer, his whole conversation is about himself. He is a good man who's faithful to God. But what's happened is over time, it became about himself. He was selfish almost by default. Not selfish in the way where he's trying to get stuff for himself, but he was for himself and solely for himself. But he was selfish because he allowed the enemy to trick him into thinking that he alone was the only follower of God. And henceforth, he began to act like that, forgetting all of the promises that God has, all of the things that God has already given him thus far. Remember when I told you he was running away from Jezebel? He was running in mud. Well, he was running in mud because he had been used by God some years ago to tell King Ahab that there is about to be some rain coming. There had been a drought many years from that. So he's literally running away in the blessings of God. Got this? And so what happens with Elijah and what we learn from him is that our life sometimes can become selfish, whether we mean it to be or whether we don't mean it to be. Martin Luther King's movement was a movement for people. It wasn't a movement for him to get power for himself. Are you following what I'm saying? He knew at some point, when you listen to his speech, especially the speech, I've been to the mountaintop, one of the greatest speeches ever written. If you listen to that speech, he knew that his time had come to an end and he was supposed to pass the torch. Elijah is at the point to where he is coming to reconcile with the fact that he needs to pass the torch. But just before that time, it's all about himself. He's only thinking about him, thinking about him, thinking about him, thinking about him, thinking about him. I was zealous for you. I was this. She's trying to kill me. She's trying to do this to me, me. And it's okay to feel these things. Fear makes you do a number of different things. It's okay. But what I like about Elijah, who was plagued by his past, is that he eventually moves on to do the will of the Lord. You see, the plague of Elijah was he seen what God could do. He knew what God was capable of doing through him. He also experienced God moving through him. He was someone who seen God work. But what he forgot was that God is just not a God who worked through him. Think about that for a minute. God is just not a God who's able to work through us, through our own personal ministry, through the way that we are accustomed to doing things. That was the plague of Elijah. He was plagued by his past. See, some things in our past plague us. And if we are not careful, we will push those things onto the next generation. For example, some things in our past made us despise people of the opposite race. They made us despise people of the opposite sex. They made us despise people that looked the wrong way. If you were in the 60s growing up in the South, there would probably be a very, very hard time for you to trust somebody of the opposite race. Well, the next generation who was born post civil rights movement, post Jim Crow laws, have no recollection of that. So they are not plagued by the past that you once had. Yet and still, God is able to use them. That brings us to the 7,000 prophets. You see, these brothers right here who were unknown to Elijah, who were hidden away from Jezebel, they undeniably, in my estimation, when I read about them, they were unknown to Elijah. So they weren't influenced by Elijah. But they were people who I believe were also unknown to Jezebel, which means these prophets did not know to be scared of Jezebel, did not know to fear Jezebel, did not know to be to have fear of these prophets of Baal. They didn't know that. So all that they were trained to do was preach the word of God without reservation, without unapologetically preach God's word. Are you following what I'm saying? You have a group of kids now, black kids specifically, who don't know Jim Crow laws, who don't know segregation, who haven't even seen the news, who haven't even seen images up close in a book or even in life of what they used to do to black people. So they don't have the same racial tension or stigmas in their mind. Henceforth, they can move past some areas that we will never be able to get to. And I say we, that was a little bit prior to me, but some people will never be able to get to. Why is this a good thing? Because where you stop, they begin. Where you have gone to the mountaintop, their floor begins to start. But if you don't allow that torch to pass, it will never happen. You see, here's the thing. The prophets were unknown to Elijah for a couple of reasons, I believe. Number one, had Elijah known they were there, Elijah would have tried to physically influence them. That's what I believe. In other words, what Elijah would have probably tried to do was put them on his team, try to go out there and take the 7,000 strong that was already hidden away and take them and put them up against the 700 some odd prophets of Baal earlier and just try to beat them up by force. We do the same things. We try to do things through our own humanistic ideology, through our own perspectives. But that's not. We're only one small part of God's plan. Are you following what I'm saying? So the prophets, Elijah was plagued by his past. The prophets were unknown to Elijah. The prophets were strong and faithful to a God. But watch this: the prophets were influenced by Elijah. You see, because after Elijah got done having this particular pity party, going back and forth, and it was really a harsh part for Elijah. Again, look at Kings, 1 Kings chapter 19. He then resolved to doing God's will. He goes on, he anoints Elisha, walks with him. He also goes on and he's taken up into the heavens, and he never dies. Why is that important? Because Elijah moved from life to legacy. And he was able to move from life to legacy in a way that didn't hinder his legacy. Sometimes we need to be legacy minded more than we are life minded. When somebody looks at my picture on the wall, when somebody looks at and listens to my tape or my video or however information is coming across at that point, they need to know that there was someone here at some point in time who stood for Christ, who stood for family, who stood for the right thing, regardless of what was going on. They need to know that, and they need to know that at some point I did not compromise. The same thing needs to be of you. When they look at your picture, mom or grandma, when they look at your picture, dad or grandpa, they need to know my grandfather stood for Jesus Christ. He did not compromise. He did not do selfish things. He was very human, but he decided to go on, or she decided to go on and connect people to Christ. Your legacy will often be more important than your life will ever be. The legacy of Dr. King is more important to many millions of people than the life of Dr. King ever will be. And that's the word tonight, and that's what God gave me. Elijah, 1 Kings chapter 19. Go back and read the whole thing. Elijah was plagued by his past, plagued by the things he's seen from Jezebel, and plagued by the fact that God only most of the times used him for ministry. He was plagued by his past, but he moved on to influence people. The prophets were unknown to Elijah. The prophets were strong and faithful to God, and the prophets were influenced by Elijah, even though he didn't directly walk with all of them. Let them loose. Let the 7,000 free. And I'm going to say this again and again. Let them loose. Quit trying to hold the next generation back from leading. Quit looking at life through your lens. God was here before you lived. God was here before you went to seminary. God was here before you started your church. God will be here after you're gone. God will be here after your degrees mean nothing. And God will be here after your church is long gone. The question is this: what are you doing to help build the future? Let them loose. Let the 7,000 free and do your part. Continue to lead people to Jesus, and understand this: if you're walking in integrity and you're walking not selfishly but walking in integrity, you're leading someone just by your walk alone. God, thank you today. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity just to continue as to study your word. Even now, just challenge us on how we walk, meaning how we live our life for you. And Lord, just challenge us concerning this word in Kings chapter 19, 1 Kings chapter 19. Let us know what you desire for us to do. We love you, we thank you, and we bless your wonderful name. And it's in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you for being with me tonight. Recap 1 Kings chapter 19, 7,000. Elijah and a lot of influence going on. All right. Hey, give me a holler. Send it to somebody, like it, share it, tag it. Let me know what you think. But thank you all so much for being here. Thank you again, Lynda. So great to see you. Alice, so great to see you as well. Eloise, thank you. I will be blessed on this evening. And I think I've seen a couple other people there. All right. You all are wonderful. Have a fantastic evening. All right. Thank you.